Let's see, I'm on. Good morning, everybody. Let me do like a little update. I just posted one of my books I wrote many years ago. And I just, all those things are on our websites. But that's, there's verses that say, you bring, stewards bring forth new and old. New and old. I was going to mention the other day, I guess I'll mention it now. I was thinking about an old Baptist pastor of mine many years ago who passed away, but one of the first Heritage Baptist Church. And I was like learning, a young Christian, privileged to be the youth pastor and to fill in for Pastor Skinner when he was gone and to preach for him. And I remember once he showed me all the nice sermon outlines that he made, and he kept them in like a file box. And of course, back then, a lot of the technology was not available, or even today, a lot of good men don't take advantage of it. But I was thinking, I said, if Brother Skinner or any minister, if they took all their sermon notes or their outlines, which he had a beautiful collection of them, and if they simply had them online, blog, website, whatever, then they would have gone forth for a long time. And many ministers who spend time studying to preach a message on a Sunday or whatever, if they simply organized somewhat to have them on YouTube or any of these video sites, then that word goes forth for a long time. And it's not hard to do. Wisdom builds the house, understanding establishes it, and through knowledge its chambers are filled with all pleasant and precious riches. So part of it is making things available to be there. But I'll do it. This is not teaching. I'll make a few notes. It was interesting when I was sitting with some of my friends in the afternoon yesterday in front of like a little closed down mattress store, and I made that short video with Jammer and Claire and Fat Boy, the pit bull. Some brother came up. He's a pastor. I don't know who he is, but the homeless friends knew him, and he just dropped off food, hot dogs and pizza and everything, and tea. And so then they started making like a little meal right there on the street. And I love all the dogs that my friends have. And then sure enough, my friend Mike was walking down the block going to work because I give him credit. He works back at like a restaurant here in town, at one of the little Jack in the Box. And he goes over at night, he does his duty. But then I noticed one of his dogs, Buddy, kind of following him. And I thought, oh, maybe he doesn't know that Buddy's out. So I stopped Mike, wait. I said, don't you know, like Buddy's following you to work? He says, yeah, I know, John. He jumped out the window. Buddy was like a street dog that Mike took in. And then as we were making the food, Jammer left already with Fat Boy. And then Paisley, I see her, it's kind of 5 o'clock in the afternoon. There's a lot of traffic. And she knows how to cross the streets by herself, which makes me uncomfortable. But I see her coming from the other side of the road. I'm like, Paisley! And she comes up, she kind of knows everybody. Sometimes Claire takes care of Paisley, one of Jammer's dogs. And it was kind of interesting to see the little flow of things. So I wanted to mention that. Oh, one other thing too, a few other things. I mentioned that coin that my friend Arthur gave me a few weeks ago. The 3 pence British coin. Nice coin, 1943. And so he gave it to me one day. I gave him a cigarette. And I told him I won't sell it. But then I wound up giving it to Charlie. And I felt that was interesting. Okay, I made a little video on it. And then I was with my friend Tim, talking to him at the mission yesterday, Timmons. And he just comes up to me and he says, John, I got a nice coin. And he shows it to me. It's a 3 pence coin. At first I thought it was another one. But then I realized it was the same one. And he didn't know I had given it. Art gave it to me. I gave it to Big Charlie. And then Tim told me. I said, oh man, Tim, this is like the one I gave to Charlie. And that's fine because Tim said, well, somebody gave it to me and I gave him a bicycle for it. which I'm sure it was Big Charlie. I said, oh no, that's fine. I said, so that one little coin given to me by Arthur, me giving it to Charlie, then Tim liked it, so Tim traded a bicycle, so that one coin blessed a lot of people. And I was glad that Big Charlie traded it for a bicycle, you know. Okay, 3 pence coin. Russia, let's see. Don, road rage. Oh, I was laughing yesterday. I see a lot of my friends, and my one friend who is battling with the city over code enforcement and neighbor to the police chief. And so he always shows me all the paperwork, and he wants to subpoena the chief to his case about the code enforcement because the chief's one of his neighbors. And he knows I kind of speak on it. I don't mention his name. So then he showed me the latest thing he had. And I'm laughing because he wants to subpoena Chief Markle as a testimony that for his case about code enforcement. And he mentions, he says, and you know, those guys, John, the chief, I didn't know this. Chief Markle used to be like Mr. Texas bodybuilder, but I'm not familiar with everybody's history. And my friend's saying, yes, John. And, you know, those guys, when they... Now, this is... I'm just saying this out of, like, humor. He said, and, you know, a lot of those bodybuilders use steroids. So maybe, like, kidding around, he says, maybe the chief was in a roid rage, like the day he had an incident. So I'm thinking, this is better than the Jerry Springer show, if you watch some... So I'm laughing, like... You mean, and I told my friend, I said, oh, I didn't know Chief Markle used to be like a big bodybuilder. Oh, yes, he was Mr. Texas. And I was going to kid and say, you know, Chief, the more I think about it, let's just let bygones be bygones. And I'm laughing to myself, thinking of all these. All right. A little bit on, let's see, these are notes I write earlier. The local media. I'm a critic of the Colder Times. I'm a critic of the media in general. The last week, all of the entire year and a half spent on the Russia, main news, top news, Russia's camp, and hardly any coverage of the last 2 weeks, where it looks like Mr. Mueller's case, the one on the indictment of 13 Russian nationals, which, that's the big one, is falling apart, collapsing, and it looks like it's possible Mr. Mueller is going to have to just drop the case. And it is a sham. Now, with all the attention that the media put on this, hardly no coverage of the collapse of not only that case, but also possibly the Manafort case, where the judges are saying, as it's working its way through the system, the judges are seeming to agree with what a lot of the public consensus is, that Mr. Mueller or Mr. Brennan, other things came up. There indeed were some highly questionable things, and some of those guys are going to get charged with criminal violations, Mr. McCabe and others. And so I thought hardly any coverage of that. But yet there was still talking about the Russia investigation. And I realized, even if this whole thing collapses and is settled, I bet you they're going to find a way for the next 2 years, because the House investigation, the Republicans released their report, Democrats did too. I bet you they're going to find a way to talk to Mr. Adam Schiff, Democrat leader of that investigation, minority. They'll probably find a way to say, to keep using the term the Russia investigation, even after it's all done, even after the possible collapse of the case. Then we'll still find a way to do that, saying, well, the Democrats are still looking into it. And that's the problem with fake news. It's them doing stuff like that. Now, the Colder Times, most of you know I'm a critic of them because they do the same thing. And I read an article from Tom Whitehurst the other day. Now, the article is an agreement with what I had said about the case he commented on in an opinion piece. Tom Whitehurst is one of the writers, editors of the Colder Times, the paper. And it was in defense of Reality Winner. Now, I have defended Reality Winner because she used to live in Kingsville, a family and all, and she's the former military girl who was caught up in leaking some of the information about how Russia hacked. They did indeed hack into and attempted to hack into various computer systems during our election. Well, she leaked that because she worked as a civilian, but she had a security clearance. And I felt that she's almost in jail now for a year, and there's questions about her case where they could get it dropped, and I want it dropped because I saw everything that happened. Now, Tom Whitehurst, I read not the entire opinion piece, and he's defending her. And then he actually says he's a liberal, and Mr. Whitehurst then, in defense of Reality Winner, says, and there should be no reason that she should be charged with an espionage treason type charge, which I agree with. But the president that opened the door to slap reporters and leakers with treason and espionage was Mr. Obama. And anybody that's a fair media critic, and as far as I know, Tom Whitehurst, Color Times, and the so-called media, mainstream media, they were silent on many of the abuses under the Obama administration, which one of them was more charges, I think it was 7 or 8. Mr. Obama charged leakers and reporters with espionage and treason type charges more than all other former presidents of the United States combined. Very rarely did a president and a Justice Department go after leakers or reporters and use the accusation of treason and espionage. Obama did it more than all other presidents combined. And it was outrageous that the media was silent in that abuse. And as I read Mr. Whitehurst's defense of Reality Winner, then he said at one point, she shouldn't be facing charges like that, which I agree. But you, media, you enable that because your unwillingness to expose, to show the truth about corruption, whether it be in an Obama administration, a Bush administration, or a Trump administration. And it was your inability and your covering up for a lot of the wrongdoing that did indeed happen. And so when I read that, I thought, they're bad, the Color Times. One more note, and I got it on. This is like just a little morning update. Mr. Blake Farenthold. I'm not a big fan of him. I, of course, disgraced congressman. Well, Farenthold, as most of you know, Texas congressman who resigned, stepped down, and settled a sexual harassment claim while he was a congressman. Well, now Mr. Farenthold got a job at the port of Port Lavaca, which is not so much a competing port, but Congressman Farenthold, of course, he was a good representative for our region, had influence and all, plus the Port of Corpus Christi. And now that he got this job with another port, just a little north of here, area where the hurricane hit, a nice area, Port Lavaca, he's gonna get paid like $150,000 a year for that job. He's a lobbyist, basically. But the Color Times will not drop. They're going after this man. And they continue, he resigned. They want him to pay the 80-something thousand. A few things to remember. He's now a private citizen. And you are private citizens. Nick Jimenez, Tom Whitehurst, all of you. And I continue to ask of you to give an account of why you covered up the crimes, the vehicular crimes of an influential connected judge in this community. And I ask you that because you are public opinion people who often get things wrong. So you can be held to an account. Farenthold is now out of office, and they do article after article after article. Disgraced congressman. At this stage, he's a private citizen. And you need to not continue to cover him. I understand you want him to pay back that 80-something thousand dollars. And then Governor Abbott, of course, said he should pay for the special election. But at this stage, he's no longer a public figure in the sense that you could go after a politician. And I think you have really crossed the line on him. I'm no big supporter of Mr. Farenthold, and I like Solomon Ortiz, the longtime Texas congressman, used to be sheriff. I liked him, and he was unseated by Farenthold in the political changes that took place at that time. So I do indeed think you're not only irresponsible, but in a way, you're crossing a line in your constant coverage of disgraced Farenthold, Mr. Farenthold this way. He's not in office. Whatever else he does, I was a little upset that he got a job for $150,000 a year. Like, not maybe jealous. I'm like, that's a lot of money. And he got that job because he's going to be a lobbyist. But the media, they think that they can go after whoever they desire. You need to, if it's public officials that you're holding their feet to the fire, fine. But we also hold your feet to the fire. We also have questions about your coverage of things that I discussed these last few weeks. And some of the way you covered things had directly to do with one of the other problems in our community. You know, somebody cut in front of me on my motorcycle, and I was maybe doing 45, 50 on the little off-road, not on top of the main highway, but the road on the bottom. I think the speed limit's about that. But I was going right past Waldron, coming back from seeing my friends. Sure enough, a lady or somebody, I was in the right lane doing about 45, something like that. And they just came right over to the right. I slowed down. I know they didn't see me. And it would have been very easy for them to just run right into me. But the driving thing's a huge problem here. I still see it a lot every day. And you called at times. You told the entire community, Benyalis case, if you're doing 70-something and the sign says 40, and you go off the road a couple hundred yards, almost kill a textile worker, send a cherry picker truck flying, the point of impact was tremendous, kinetic energy, and you told the whole community, if you do that, it's not a crime. You get a lane change. Ticket for unsafe lane change. That's it. That's what you told them. Because you covered up for a corrupt judge. So we hold your feet to the fire. And obviously, when I said, did Mr. Benyalis pay you $1.8 million? You say, well, John, we don't have to. You should answer to this community. And I didn't even check that there's a lot of other news going on. And I noticed how the media, some of them, oh yes, let's not talk about the debacle the last 2 weeks of the investigations. Let's not discuss that. Let's just keep saying what we want to say. So you don't serve the community. I read your paper, and I'm a media critic, and I read ABC, NBC, and all of them. You don't serve this community. Because your partisanship, if you want to be against Trump and all these other things, we get it. But you're constant. And then I just showed how you're so biased that you would even cover up for a Hispanic judge for a terrible, terrible crime. I've seen people dead many, many, many times in car wrecks. And you told the community, you're just fine doing that, running them off the road. And then you try to be a voice. So, please, we're tired of hearing the Farenthold thing, and you describing him day after day after day. Disgrace, disgrace, disgrace. Okay, he's out. He doesn't want to pay the money. He doesn't have to by law. All right. God bless everybody. It's an update.